This one is a lesson on covering 7 difficult emotions. I have a feeling that when you read or heard having difficult emotions, you might have thought, only 7? You're not alone. Many people feel exactly as you do. Everyone's got to start somewhere, and you're taking a giant step forward by learning about these 7. So let's get to it. If you learn to handle these 7 emotions, guilt, shame, anxiety, helplessness, disappointment, confusion, and loneliness, you'll be well prepared for whatever comes your way. That is an absolute promise. There's a lot of disagreement about what constitutes human emotion. Some experts maintain that surprise, joy, interest, rage, disgust, shame, fear, and anguish are the only emotions hardwired in us. Others claim that only surprise, anger, fear, happiness, disgust, and sadness are innate. And still others argue that the 4 basic emotional response patterns are panic, rage, expectancy, and fear. What can be agreed upon is that people regularly avoid and minimize a specific side of emotions. It is these exact emotions, more often than not, that trigger acting out. If you can learn to effectively handle the most troubling emotions, you can significantly improve your life and enhance your emotional self. Everyone experiences painful emotions the same way. It must be taken into account, the emotion at hand and the individual's tolerance for pain. We can better understand this dynamic by viewing painful emotions as internal wounds that are much like external physical wounds. Assessing both kinds of pain, we must consider similar factors: the site, size, nature, and the depth of the wound, a person's general frame of mind, how they feel about the particular pain, whether or not they're suffering with other hurt, their ability to tolerate pain, and their previous experience with pain. Let's take these factors one by one and see if the process informs your understanding of painful emotions. The first factor is the nature and depth of wounding or pain. You would probably agree that a slight insult, say not being invited to a dinner party hosted by someone you met once, doesn't hurt nearly as much as not being invited to a close friend's wedding. The closer you are to people and the more you expect from them, the higher the likelihood of feeling deeper hurt. If your sister forgets to call you back because she's feeding her new baby, you probably won't get that bent out of shape. If she neglects to stop by when you're in a hospital, you'll likely be terribly offended. The point is that the nature and depth of emotional wounding is relevant as a predictor to how badly you may feel. Let's take general frame of mind. If you're an upbeat person with whom the glass is usually half full, you'll have an easier time with emotional pain than if you're a gloom and doomer. If you're a positive individual, even when your feelings get hurt, you might think the wounding is unintentional and let it go. If you're more pessimistic, tend to personalize or see yourself as a perpetual victim, you'll zero right in on the pain, making it look larger than it really is. If you're the upbeat type, your spirits will bounce back to normal far more quickly after perceiving injury than someone who believes they live under a black cloud. Some people simply have more buoyancy and emotional resilience than others. Your mindset also makes a difference. If you're convinced that you can't deal with rejection and just know you'll be marooned on an island for the rest of your life if you don't get the job you want, you're setting yourself up for misery. If rejection doesn't bother you as much as guilt, You'll be able to neutralize the sting and move on. It's all in your perspective, the frame you place around the picture. It is important to consider whether you're suffering from one emotional wound or a host of them. If your best friend moves away a week after your house burns down and your dog is put to sleep, you might understandably feel emotionally overwhelmed and that you're about to lose your mind. If your wife walks out, but you have a terrific job and a troop of support, a family and friends, you might believe you'll make it through the night. Even emotionally strong and resourceful people may go under temporarily when many things go wrong at once. Now, let's look at a person's ability to tolerate pain. Scientific studies conclude that the tolerance for both physical and emotional pain depends in a large part on individuals' biochemical makeup, that is, their brain chemistry. Deficits in natural pain soothers, such as serotonin, make you more prone towards depression and anxiety than people who possess the ideal quantity. If your experience has proved you can handle pain, your expectation will be positive, and vice versa. If you're a person with a low pain tolerance, the slightest insult may feel devastating, whereas if you are a person with high pain tolerance, you may be able to shake it off. Lastly, your history of emotional wounding might affect how you deal with painful emotions. If you've been a victim of severe abuse and/or neglect, or have suffered other trauma, you will almost certainly be more sensitive to emotional wounding than other people, even if you do not realize it. Along with an increased sensitivity, you also might have a decreased physiological capacity to tolerate something because regular and excessive stress can severely deplete the production of neurotransmitters that regulate emotion. Years of suffering may have heightened your despair and diminished your hope. You may possess a little reserve for comforting or taking care of yourself. Tending to your wounds may be too hard, particularly when old wounds haven't healed before you suffer new ones. You tend to compare yourself to other people even when you try to resist it. Making comparisons in the area of emotional pain is particularly tricky. If you and your friends are taking a glass blowing class and happen to burn yourselves, you could inspect and compare your wounds. When you tell a friend you're severely depressed and he says he is too, you're moving from the concrete to the abstract. Do you both experience exactly the same sensations when you're blue? How do you measure your pain against your friends? Is yours as bad or worse than his? Everyone's pain is subjective, whether physical or emotional. What may be unbearable for you may be tolerable for someone else, or the other way around. In trying to comprehend why people experience emotional wounding differently, it's important not to make judgments or compare yourself with others in a way that makes you feel inadequate or a failure. Everyone starts out at a different place, and we are all limited in part by genetics and our early lives. Although all emotional pain has elements in common, everyone's heartache is unique. The 7 emotions may or may not resonate with you. If you've been working on emotional healing for a long time, you may feel only 1 or 2 feelings truly difficult. If you're a novice, don't despair. In the following lessons, we will be devoting an entire lesson to each emotion discussed. For now, let's briefly explain all 7 of them. Guilt. Guilt is pervasive in our society and even more so in the lives of people. The people that I have worked with that have eating disorders or a disordered or unhealthy relationship with food or themselves tend to be other oriented, a caretaker, a do-gooder, have an overly developed sense of responsibility, and rarely, if ever, believe they are doing enough. Every failed relationship is her fault. Every situation that needs fixing is her job. Every person with a problem becomes her pet project. Many clients live in a constant state of guilt as if they can never get things right or do as much as they believe they should. They have such incredibly high standards that they're doomed to fall short. Because they're often people pleasers and feel bad and selfish when they do things for themselves, their self-care is often fair to poor. Shame. Shame happens when you live far outside a state of grace. Many of my clients have believed that their behavior is sinful and disgusting, but were unable or unwilling to stop. 9 out of 10 times these clients come from shame-based families, and the feeling is strongly familiar to them. One of the ways they express their feelings is through addictions and obsessions and attaining a weight that is grossly below or above the norm. Disordered eating may be a way to maintain the shame that they unconsciously think they ought to feel or are used to feeling. At the rock bottom of all emotional suffering is helplessness. It occurs when there's nothing you can do. It underlines many feelings: frustration, impatience, anger, and anxiety. You can't help but feel reverberations from infancy and early childhood. Although you may not recall lying powerless in the crib, your body holds the memory. In later years of childhood and adulthood, feeling helpless is often associated with fear that something bad will happen. Something terrible is going to happen, and I can't do anything about it. My clients often combat their helplessness by taking action, usually in the form of controlling their food intake or eating everything in sight. Anxiety is often correlated with a family history of depression or anxiety and may lack the proper balance of neurotransmitters to help people relax. Disappointment lends itself to acting out, so much so that it's surprising that everyone doesn't turn to it when they feel let down. Chronic disappointment can lead people to believe that they don't deserve to have positive expectations and outcomes in life. Wanting causes them to feel needy, and so they deny their genuine desires. Because it's too scary to have expectations of yourself from other people, you turn to something that's predictable and always in good supply. This could be food, TV, porn, alcohol, drugs, sex, etc. People often deal with disappointment by raising their expectations of themselves as if to say, others might disappoint me, but I have high standards. I will figure out how to never disappoint myself. Workaholics are also people who tend to be chronically disappointed. Confusion is often overlooked as a troubling emotion because it's considered one of the smaller feelings, not a giant like fear or shame. It runs rampant in people who are not in touch with their physical needs and wants. Most of confusion is about the concept of enough in numerous areas of your life. What drives your confusion is the desperate urge to find out what's right so that you won't fail or make mistakes. Because it's difficult to tolerate the tension created by vague, mixed, or conflicting emotions, you often give up and lean into negative behaviors. Loneliness is such a soul killer that I'm not surprised that lonely people seek solace in substances and other numbing resources or addictions. To feel lonely harkens back to childhood fears of being abandoned, rejected, dismissed, ignored, unseen, or unheard in your untutored young mind. When you weren't reflected in someone's eyes, you felt disconnected, invisible, and annihilated as if you didn't exist. When you feel this depth of loneliness, you are desperate to bond with something, anything, to merely feel alive. You look for something that reminds you of the comfort of being held and fed, connected to someone, and to a time you were loved and valued. You might also qualify the emptiness and aloneness with obsessing about things you can control and proving how little you need.